we're recording. So yeah, we're recording, and we were just talking. And I said we need to get that on film. So Jennifer said, "Hey guys, it's that time of year. I'm starting to get invited to a lot of what, Jennifer?
Weddings.
And why would they invite you to a wedding? What would you do?"
Well, two things. I've got a lot of kids who are of marital age, and then also booths for wedding shows, which I
Yeah.
love working with first timers. I love working with post divorce. So
Yeah,
wedding
and
planners are a great connection for me, and
you've
people at a
talked
wedding show.
you've talked to me about that in the past, and I've had in the past, and for those watching, I recommend this. And Jennifer will laugh. If you're going to have a booth, you better have a hook. And if anyone remembers the old Gong Show, on the Gong Show, performer would come out, and the person, if they stunk, or same with the Night of the Apollo, if they stunk and everyone yelled and screamed, they got rid of them. On the Gong Show, this big old hook came out and from left of stage and drug them out. So I always say, if you're going to work a convention, always try to go to something where that's antithetical to the convention. So when Jennifer talks about a wedding convention, what are the things that are going to be at a wedding? You're going to have you should have transportation providers. I learned they were never there. You're going to have flowers. You're going to have catering. You have locations. Mark's going to talk about in a second. That's the part where I say we need to record that. He's going to talk about how he fit into that. But typically, you don't see a mortgage lender there. Typically, you don't see a realtor there. So it's really wise to do that. But again, you need to have a hook, something that's going to keep them there. And
to get them in and to give information so you can contact, because they're free.
As soon as they ask a question, the old adage is, if you can get them to ask you a question, they're yours. So in that frame of mind, Jennifer here asked Mark, "Hey, have you ever worked a wedding?" And a wedding show, and he said,
"Yeah, absolutely. I attended the Wedding Expo in Dallas in 2024. There was roughly 3,300 people that showed up to that, and the majority of the couples that walked into our booth, when asking them, have they created a budget for their wedding, and I'd say probably 95% of the people that we spoke to had not even considered a budget, didn't know
because daddy's money."
Well, they had mentioned, other people were going to be donating to it. They didn't even actually, I would say probably 95% of the people, same percentage, really didn't know where the money was coming from in order to pay for the wedding. They didn't even have an idea of where to start on their budget. So anyone listening to this right now, I'm going to put a plug in for Aspire Coaching. We have a fantastic premarital coaching plan for anyone that is getting married. My personal feeling is that a future husband and wife should be going to a financial literacy class and basics on financial literacy. How are we going to combine finances? Now that they're going to be a couple, and ask one of the most important questions I think to ask. In that, I'll give you a prelude to a type of coaching session question: is what was money like growing up for you in your family?
Well, I think we should both answer that. Jennifer and I should both answer that. So I'm totally hijacking this call. So there's probably going to be some good stuff here.
Well, hey, this is your show to talk about, so you go with what you want.
Well, rate ain't but a thing. So
right.
understanding money, but Jennifer and I, we've become really good friends. Mark, we've become good friends. Jennifer and I have known each other about 10 years. We found out we're both from the great state of Ohio.
Oh,
we always tease about that. I tease about that here on our podcast. There's some similarities to how we were raised. We both were born in Columbus, and I would say we were both from middle-class families, hardworking middle-class families. But I'm going to tell my story about how money worked, and then let's have Jennifer talk a little bit about how money was treated in her family. So I was born in Columbus, and my first 3 years of my life, we lived on a road called Morse Road. My dad worked for Rockwell International. He was for all intents and purposes, a rocket scientist. He had gone to The Ohio State University to study agriculture, which is what the university was founded about, and in the 50s when he went there, that's what people went there for. Then he got into engineering, and the Air Force took him down that rocket engineer glide path, if I might put it that way. But in 1973, we moved to a small farm in Northwest Ohio, the farm that my father was born on. My bedroom growing up was where my dad, the room he was born in, and his sister and brother as well. And I lived there till I was 18. I went off to the Air Force. So how did money work in the Dammeier family? I don't have any pictures to show you, and I'd like to do that in another episode. But when we look back at the old photos, what few they are, you'll see pictures of me. There's one in the winter, in a cold winter in Ohio, and I've got mismatched clothes on and two boots of different colors and a pair of mittens that are duct taped together. They literally have
and Wonder Bread between a layer of socks and your boots. Wonder Bread
plastic
bags.
bag, a plastic bread bag, right? To keep the moisture out, because the boots had holes in them and they were going to get wet. But anyway, that's just how you did it. And I wore my brother's. So plaid pants were cool in 1978 when my brother was 14 years old. But in 1984, when I got them passed down to me, they weren't cool. And Fancy Pants Lance became my nickname. For those of you who know my DJ mantra, that's where the fancy pants came from, because it was embarrassing. I mean, you didn't buy new clothes. You wore things were.
And it wasn't a money thing.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a way of thinking thing. And so ironically, in our town, a lot of people thought we were wealthy. Oh, the Dammeiers are wealthy. And I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? What they gauged that on was that we took 2 vacations a year. In the summer, we went to the Outer Banks for 2 weeks. And we went to Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg and the historical route through Newport News.
I'm doing that this summer.
Spent 2 weeks at the beach. And in the fall, we went to New England. So why would people know our business? Well, in small town America, everyone knows everyone's business. But what was unique was my parents made me write full-fledged journal book reports about these trips. And I have these, and they're it's funny to look back at them to read. This is when strip mining was happening in the Allegheny Mountains, Pennsylvania, and I'm writing as a kid and drawing. There's nothing left. The mountain's been removed, and back then, they just kind of didn't do anything. Yeah. It was traumatic to a young kid. I'm not trying to go left or right here. I was just like, wow, these beautiful mountains are destroyed, and oh well, at least our car can drive. And but money was. Oh my gosh, money, it did not grow on trees. $100. I saved a whole summer and a half to 1987. I bought my first boom box, a Hitachi boom box. It had this big woofer in the center. And you remember it? And I saved all summer to buy it. And we went to Service Merchandise. Yeah. And for those of you in Middle Tennessee, you know Service Merchandise was based right down the street here in Brentwood, Tennessee. But in Ohio, and around the world, Service Merchandise was a really recognizable, very high-end brand. And my parents were absolutely appalled that I would spend $118 on this musical device of the devil. This is back when they controlled what, they're like, you're not going to listen to Quiet Riot. You're not going to listen to the thing that Twisted Sister, how horrible that was.
John Cusack, Lance Dammeier.
I worked a whole summer to buy that. I worked baling hay at $4 an hour. I worked in the grocery store. I think minimum wage was $3.25. People are like, yeah, right. No, it was.
Well, and your dad did a lot of investing, and he was. Yeah. You had money, and you were good with it too.
Later, we learned a term from Dave Ramsey called "living like no one else, so you can live like no one else."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what my parents did. It's no secret. They both passed on. They made millions. They saved.
That is not what my parents did.
I know we're going to get to you in a second. We never had new cars. We never flew in an airplane. We ate at rest areas when we traveled. We stopped at the 72 Dodge Coronet. Out came the Igloo cooler. The sandwiches were already made. The orange juice was poured. The smell of the dump, the toilet with the hole in the ground, wafted over
towards us. Little roadside pull-off thing. Yeah.
Yep. And
not to interrupt you, Lance, but when you said orange juice, what pinged in my mind was Tang.
Absolutely.
Yep, or Kool-Aid.
Yeah, yep. And the metal seat on the concrete pipe. You guys, you got to stand.
Yep. And I mean, there was just no frills. If you went on that vacation at the beach, I got a T-shirt. You got an airbrush T-shirt. Your limit's $4.10. Don't go over it. You didn't even ask to go over it. So um, I bought my first car, my second car. I had two cars in high school. I bought my first car. My dad sold it to me like $100. That was a 64 Plymouth. My second car was a 70 Cuda. I paid $150 for it. So several $100,000. I don't have it right now. I've got another one, but it was a number matching car that became, no one would have known that, but it became worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somebody has it somewhere. But to say I could buy a car for $150 that was drivable and I could go places and work on it, that's, some people can't even comprehend that. So we really live, it wasn't said we're going to live like no one else so we could live like no one else later. But it was true. And when my mom passed away, I think Jennifer knows this, but the flat out truth was my dad had no idea how much money they had. I don't think. After my mom passed away, where I'm from, she passed away in 2005, 20 years. They didn't have computers that notified the banks, all these little banks. They would read the obituaries, and she had saved millions of dollars, and it was incredible. And this is also back when you could get 7% annually on a 10-year CD compounding, and they found over a dozen of those.
And you bought what were the things that they bonds, or was it bonds that they used to buy a lot?
My mother bought myself and my daughter Olivia some bonds, and Livy just cashed hers in a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think that's possible anymore. What they turned into, I think $500 bonds turned into like $3,000 and $4,000.
Yeah.
You could have been invested, obviously, in the right thing, turned into more, but those are pretty good performing. But anyway, there was no asking for candy. Can I get a candy bar? There was no, you didn't get soft drinks at a restaurant. You got water. There was no questions asked.
Do you think that they operated on a budget, or they were just incredibly frugal, like a written budget like Mark does?
No, I remember there were always, the spreadsheets were out. And
okay.
Who could have imagined, and Mark can speak to this as well, but I'm not so sure anyone, first of all, people didn't believe they were going to live as long as they live now. If you were in the 50s and 60s and making financial plans, for example, my father, who has since passed, he had long-term care, like for a nursing home and stuff, that for those who used it, it must be breaking these financial institutions, because they never thought, they thought people would die at 55.
Yeah. The algorithms were off.
Yeah, he had tremendous policies that he's like, I think I bought this for $500. I paid for it over 1 year, and the whole policy was $500, and now it's worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Easy $500 a month now, because I've checked into it, because I have a lot of longevity.
Yeah, and there's all types of restrictions and outs and stuff like that. But Jennifer, tell us about money and But so the answer is, there was always a budget. When we went on vacation, they knew exactly what they had. It was all cash. It was only going to be cash. We never went anywhere out. It wasn't like, oh, can we go do that? No, that isn't what we planned. This is what we're doing. No veering. So and there was always cash for when an emergency happened. There was always money. They never had to borrow it. Go ahead.
And your dad was W-2?
W-2 engineer. Yeah, I don't think he ever made more than $60,000.
Okay. So my dad was an entrepreneur, and my dad's still living. So, he did not plan well for retirement, and he did not budget well, and he abhors the IRS, and I am not super fond of them as well. But I'll say this, he was raised by a single mother, born in Huntington, West Virginia, grew up in the southern Ohio on the river, and then moved up to Columbus and eventually to Worthington, where he graduated high school. So, both my parents came from very little to nothing, and Dad did not go to college, but he created an independent insurance agency that he had for a number of years and did very well financially as far as the income. Like, they were comfortable. And you talk about vacations. They went on vacations. They went on weekend vacations. They bought timeshares back in the day that I still have one of. They'd trade that one and go down to Island Rod and the Keys and fish. My dad was a big fisherman. He'd go salmon hunt fishing in New York, and they'd go a couple other places. Spring break, we'd go down to the other timeshare they had in Tampa, St. Pete. But it felt like we did not have a lot of money. And my dad was, whereas your mother did the books and all that, my mother did not and still does not. So, like when it was back to school shopping time, it was kind of sneak in with the bags of clothes kind of thing. And I moved to Worthington, Ohio in 78. And when I turned 16, like when my friends were turning 16, their parents bought cars. Like it's Worthington. It's a well-heeled community. So their parents were buying them cars. And these were often not used cars. And I would say all but maybe 2 of my friends, maybe 3, had a credit card that was theirs, that their parents paid off every month, regardless of what they did with it. Yeah, Mark's editing a bunch of what we call military terms. And that was not my life. And so it was difficult to be from, like I was given $10 a week for lunch money. And that bought the $2 cafeteria meal, but we had open lunch. And even in that time period to go to McDonald's or, Pizza Hut to get the individual personalized pizza, it was like a $4 meal. And so that was twice my budget. And I worked and I paid my way through Ohio State because what's now called the FAFSA, my dad didn't want to fill that predecessor to that out because he didn't want the IRS in his business, literally. And so I paid my way through Ohio State managing bookstores and could not get any student loans or anything. But when I started Ohio State, well, first of all, my mom graduated from Ohio State in 62, $125 a quarter. When I started Ohio State, it was $5.25 a quarter. So it had gone up and I started in 85. So it had gone up $400 in whatever that math is, because I was a history major, 62 to 85, $400. It took me 6.5 years to graduate because I was paying my way through it all. And when I graduated, it was $9.25 a quarter. So it had gone up the same amount in the 6.5 years I was in. So budgeting was never something that I was taught.
Right.
But it was something I learned because I had to be somewhat responsible for my money. But to put it down and to note it and to write it, no. Now, when I got married, I was given $5,000 to do everything. Anything else I had to come up with on my own. So I did a bunch of budgeting at that time. I did have a gas credit card in my name at 18, but I paid it off. I had a state, like from my bank, I had a credit card and I used it to get books a quarter and I'd pay that off. But to have a sit down, written out budget, no. And one of the things that started this conversation was when we got married then, and I don't think it might have been an Ohio thing, but we had to do, maybe it was from the church, but we had to do marital counseling where you talked about, how you resolve differences, like, arguments and all this. You had budgeting, a financial course. You talked about your religious beliefs. You talked about your sexual needs or whatever. You talked about all those things before you got married. It was like a 10-week thing. So, budgeting for couples is really important even today. And I think it is a really good thing. If we went to a wedding venue, one of the ways you have people stop to talk to you is you have what we call a draw. So a lot of times, like when I was doing one in Spring Hill, I'd have a drawing for a gift certificate to Tito's because it's an amazing Mexican restaurant there. And I would have just, name, phone number, email, and then 4 check marks. I don't want anything from you. I'd love to know the value of my house. I'm interested in selling. I'm interested in buying. And I tell them, doesn't matter. I always say I'm too busy to chase people who don't want me to help them, but I'm not too busy to help the people who need me. So, that was the draw. Sometimes my daughter, Hannah, is a massage therapist. Sometimes my draw is that I bought her a chair for chair massage. Mm-hmm. She'll do massages. I think if we did a wedding one, a draw might be a session with Mark that when they buy a home is reimbursed off closing costs. We as lender and realtor are allowed to help buy down rates. We're not in Tennessee. I'm not allowed to give money to a client from my compensation. But I can, in certain situations, help, like buy down rate or buy a home warranty or some of those things. So we could do something along those lines. It's something we could definitely discuss. And if you're watching this and that's intriguing to you, feel free to give us ideas or what have you. Let's see. We're going to be airing this on what day? I don't even know. I've lost all track of days. The 31st?
Monday.
The day that my dog is having his ACL surgery, which was not in the budget. But what's been going on with everybody this week? And then we'll get into rate ain't nothing but a thing, which will probably be a quick discussion.
Well, for me, I just dealing with a lot of combination of career coaching along with financial coaching, and that's it. It's really not changed from one week to the next. That's primarily what's going on, but it is a tremendous amount of focus on we're not in the right place with our job, whether it's toxic, whether it's average, whether it's just I feel like I need to have a change because I can't get out from where I'm at. That's largely what we're going through. And just to go back a second into money, what was money like growing up?
Oh yeah.
For me, money growing up, we always had a roof over our head. I'm the youngest of five. Mm-hmm. And we always had a roof over our head. We always had clothes, and we always had food. Our clothes, we didn't have strip malls. We didn't have malls were just coming in
Wyoming didn't have like a big Mall of America is in Minnesota.
We had one mall, but it really didn't start until about the mid 80s.
Yes.
For my clothes, I ordered clothes out of the Sears catalog
and hoped they fit.
Yep. And I remember prior to the school year starting, we would take measurements and we would look in and order from the catalog. Mm-hmm. A lot of times those clothes didn't work out. And so that's really important. Understanding what life was like and what money was like for you growing up can have a massive impact in a husband and wife and two people coming together in a marriage. If that's what you were exposed to, let me fast forward how this showed up in my life. I felt like as I was growing up, I missed out on a lot of stuff that other kids had. Mm-hmm. So what happened for me? I translated that into, I have a big boy job. Now I can go buy everything under the sun. And yep. I ran up debt. And so when you're bringing two people together, and getting and exposing that and getting them to talk about what were things like for you, and how is that translating into your adult life is some of the greatest that has nothing to do with budgeting. Not a single thing about budgeting. In fact, you can take the budget and kind of toss it out because and just focus in on how does it make you feel now that you're an adult and you can buy when you want to buy. Mm-hmm. These are kinds of questions that you're asking in for those listening. That's the kind of questions I'm going to ask in our coaching session. The reason why we're doing that, especially with a couple, is because now it may have been in the wedding expo that I went to, very few people talked about money. Well, guess what the number one reason for divorce is? Mm-hmm. Financial arguments. Mm-hmm. And so my coaching and the focus on bringing people together in a premarital format is to get this stuff out onto the table, talking about it, exposing it in a safe, comfortable environment, non-judgmental environment where people can learn. Between what they had as growing up, if I wanted something, I had to work for it. I started my jobs 9 years old, delivering 3 newspapers for my brother. And every time I knocked on the door of this one house, the lady either gave me a nickel, a dime, or a quarter, depending on whether it was weekday or a Sunday. Sunday newspaper was much heavier. She always gave me a nickel or gave me a quarter. And so that was at 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at the age of 15 on a temporary learner's driver's license for a motorcycle. And that's how I got to work.
Mm-hmm. I had a moped.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if a future wife of mine didn't know that about me, she may not understand what it means for me to want to save an extra $1,000 because I didn't have that growing up.
Yeah. And how much was a candy bar too? Like, I mean, candy bars were a quarter. So when you say a quarter, you know, in today's money, that's like $1.25 to $2.50.
Yeah,
Which still isn't much, but you multiply it by the houses. That's the point of it.
A Snickers bar at Publix is $3.
Yeah.
And after tax,
Bullshit.
What?
Yeah.
Bullshit.
No, it is.
I know.
You know, so like I said, everyone that is listening to this that is thinking about getting married, the package that I've put together, at least for in my business, that's Aspire Coaching, is designed to lay out on a yearly basis what is it that you need to do for a wedding, and based on a number of months out from your wedding. We have a checklist that you can go through. At the expo that I was attending, I handed out over 100 different checklists, and because people didn't have any idea how far out do you need to plan your wedding.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Right,
I don't want to fault anybody. You don't know what you don't know. This is your wheelhouse. You've learned from experience. You have some great tools from the different people that you've learned under. So anybody who's watching this and going, well, oh, that's not what this is about. This is about us helping you budget for weddings, budget for houses, get all the things.
Well, and talk about. Let me give you guys an example. I won't give any names, but I want to share an example. I had a client that had been homeless 3 times in his life. He didn't reveal this to his wife until he revealed this in a coaching session at a deep level. Mm-hmm. It was important for him to have $20,000. $15,000 in a savings account, because what that meant to him was that he was never going to be homeless.
Yeah. Well,
if you're not talking to your potential spouse about the impacts of what money was like for you, or the lack thereof money, or the abundance of money in your life, then that's the starting point to end the financial arguments.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up 2 other things too. So even though we went through these trainings, my ex didn't really, I don't know what he was doing. All I know is that when he presented me with his first budget, because he insisted on being in control of all the finance, and it was such a fight that it wasn't worth my energy, particularly once we had kids. But the first budget that he ever created, it was the bill, the mortgage, the utilities, the bills. There was not a line item for food or gas for the car, and every dollar was spent. I'm like, I think we need food, so we had a whole discussion about that. And I was very financially constrained during my marriage, and there was money in the family. It was just not, I didn't have access to it. And so, or I should say I had access to $1,000 a month, for all the family things. And so to have an F-off fund, just like that guy's 15 to 20,000 security, if that's something that a wife or husband needs, that's not, I think, a negative implication of the relationship. It's a security implication of the relationship from their past. And that's why that kind of counseling is important, because it has nothing to do with the relationship I have with the person I'm marrying. It has to do with my relationship with the past and what I saw from my parents, or past relationship, or whatever.
Yeah, they're those kinds of sessions and those kinds of revelations in those sessions are has nothing to do with money, or budgeting.
Yeah.
Has everything to do with who your past experiences.
Yeah. Your emotions of money.
Yeah. I know let's transition into that.
We don't have time. We'll have to rename it. It's okay.
That's okay. So I wanted to share really quick one thing that's going on this last week with me, and that's comps, but it's based off of, I have some unique properties I'm running numbers on because they want to sell. We didn't have a lot of sales last year. So it's very hard. So in some situations you can go say, okay, equity rose at about 3%. So your home is 3% plus maybe some things that you've done to it to make it more appealing. So we're going to price it at this. Some of these are not that situation. So you're having to go in and look at ones that have closed. When I price a house, I look at comps, which are closed homes similar to yours. In the country, it's hard because you're not in a neighborhood zoned to the same school within a certain distance from others, not crossing county lines. If they cross county lines, then you have to adjust for that. And then I also look at competition. If we're going to put your house on the market at $750,000, what else could somebody buy for $725 to $775 that if they're approved for $750, they might also look at? If you're looking online at a house as a buyer, you usually look at 10 houses over the course of 10 weeks. Your house that I'm listing for you has to be better than the other 9 in presentation, location, condition, access to see it, and pricing. So I don't love Zillow, but Zillow has massive amounts of data they can pull from. So on Tuesday, yesterday, the Zillow economist updated their forecast model for U.S. homes prices in 2025. They said that the escalation will be 0.08% or 0.8%. They had it at 1.1%. They revised that. That was February. So now end of March, they're doing it at 0.8. They had expected this year going into it to be at 2.9, which kind of the average is 3. But Lance, like we were talking about, people are stuck in these rates.
Mm-hmm.
We had clients who bought a house with a 2.5 or a 3.5, and they want to do a refi on the same house. And they can't do it at today's rates. They wouldn't be able to buy that house.
Nope.
And so they're stuck in it, let alone buy a bigger house or a senior downsizing to maybe a newer house on one level. So there's a lot of people who are stuck because of rates. And I've said before, we don't want rates to go down too fast because that can cause a recession, a hard recession. So they're saying that this year, maybe, we were thinking it's going to be a good year for some, always, right? So I wanted to really quickly share the top markets, the 300 largest housing markets that they expect strongest home prices to appreciate in between Feb 25 and Feb 26. Atlantic City, New Jersey, expect 5.1. And my agents I know along the New England and DC area, they're popping right now. Multiple offers, quick days on market, different things like that. Knoxville, Tennessee, 4.7 expected. Kingston, New York, 4.7. Torrington, Connecticut, 4.6. Bangor, Maine, 4.6. Rochester, New York, 4.4. Vineland, New Jersey, 4.4. Concord, New Hampshire, 4.2. Norwich, Connecticut, 4.1. And Fayetteville, Arkansas, at 3.9. The ones that have the least growth or negative growth are except for Chico, California, which is number 9, are all in Louisiana and Texas. Huma, Louisiana, Lake Charles, Louisiana, New Orleans, Lafayette, Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana, Odessa, Texas, Beaumont, Texas, Alexandria, Texas, Chico, California, and then Midland, Texas are all expected very low rise. So what that tells me is we're still in that neutral. In Middle Tennessee, we're still in that neutral to favoring buyers market. So sellers can still expect a decent price, but not aspirational pricing. And they can expect to have to do some concessions. They can have to expect to do some repairs, but get a fair price on their home. As a buyer, you will probably be able to get your contingent on sale accepted with a kick-out clause. You will probably be able to get concessions and probably your agent compensation roll, paid for by the seller, depending on what amount it is and what the seller needs to go to their new place. You can still expect to have some repairs done, but not crazy bottom out prices. It also means that if any of those people that are in New England are trying to get out of that high tax area, this is a very good time for them to sell there and move to Texas with no tax, because they're going to have, like California did. Now, if too many of them do, then there's going to be a supply and demand issue, or to come to Tennessee, to help those buyers out. But it's a tricky market to navigate, and we are gonna talk about the Rain Ain't Nothing But a Thing on a different day. I don't know if we're gonna roll back like everything one week on the episode that airs. What would it be, the 13th or 14th, whatever that Monday is in April? We're gonna have a foundation title COO is coming in to talk to us about title insurance, title policies. Do you need it? Do you not? What's it cover? All those things. So I'm not sure if we're going to roll the rate to next week and then mark to after that. So we'll figure it out. But it's going to still be fun and exciting for everybody, right?
How can it not be?
Yeah.
So
we'll come back to rates ain't but a thing. And we'll talk about rate environment for a second. They continue to, they can go ahead.
I'll give you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Lance, but I'll give you a rate that ain't nothing but a thing. So last quarter of 2024, U.S. consumer debt was crossed $18 trillion. $18 trillion.
Yes, and it's not house, it's credit cards.
Right.
And in cars.
Yep, it's all of the consumer debt. So I brought that up because we're coming to the end of the first quarter of 2025. And those numbers are going to be released soon. So it'll be interesting to see, are people taking on more debt, or is that number going down?
Okay, so Mark, I about had a coronary the other day driving, listening to someone talking about rates and all this, because the house rates at 2.8, they're not drowning in house debt. It's not 08. It's not what was going on then, where they're like, I'm better to just walk away. And the person across the street is like, I'm better to let my neighbor walk away and buy their house at a cheaper price and sell mine or do whatever. So it's credit card debt because prices escalated so quickly and people were using their backup emergency, or maybe they did have a small emergency fund and they used through it, but car prices too, and car interest. They were discussing in Arizona, especially the guys who have to have work trucks, and they got to have a lot of things on them, and they live in their cars almost, they're day in, day out from like 6, 7 in the morning, these kind of work trucks. And these are expensive trucks. Do you know what the payments these guys are walking out of these dealerships with?
Probably $1,500 to $2,000 a month on a truck.
With what you could rent a 1-bedroom even in Nashville for.
These are cars?
Truck payments for $1,500 to $1,800.
Yeah,
that makes me physically sick to my stomach.
I'm smirking because you should see the credit reports I pull. It can completely validate what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to have two people working full time. To have two cars that can total $150,000 worth of debt. That is not uncommon.
Right.
And if you have a truck that is $70,000 to $80,000, you have I want to go Tesla and have a $70,000. Right there, you have $140,000 to $150,000 worth of debt.
Right. And on the income to debt ratio, Lance, we were looking at some houses this weekend that were, $400,000. And with this person's scenario, that payment was going to be around $3,100. But you have a truck payment in there, and that's half the price of your mortgage. And that income to debt ratio, that's why it's so important to really think about what you're doing. especially if you're going to buy a house, do you have to have a new car right now or do you want a new car? Okay. So your car is falling apart. Do you have to have a new car or do you need a new to you car?
Jennifer, what you're talking about is, and let's go back to the early part of this conversation because this is really, really important. When you have two people that are on the same page working towards the same goals, we're not asking whether or not we want to have a car. Those people are working together towards a common goal, to a common end point. And in coaching, what I lay out for my clients is always be thinking about start by thinking about the end.
Yeah.
Start by thinking about where you want to go. And we're going to navigate the obstacles in those ways. And when you have a disparity between people who are not on the same page, a husband and wife that's doing this, and a husband and wife that's doing that, and we're not on the same page, we can't. It's a conflict. It's a natural conflict, and we stay stuck for years, maybe possibly even decades, until we get to that point. And going back to the earlier part of the conversation, getting back to that point of asking, what was money like for you growing up? Because I'll relate it to my life. My wife, a future wife for me, may never have understood if I don't tell her that when I grew up, if I wanted anything extra, I had to go work for it. And in my adult life, now that I had a big boy job, I could go buy whatever I want to, whenever I wanted to, and however I wanted to.
It was almost Rumspringa with your wallet.
I didn't care how much debt I had.
Yeah.
And that might be counter to her goals of having a secure family, a secure home, a foundation, of growth-minded in a growth mindset, so that when we're at a point where we have abundance, we can be generous. We can do the things that we want to do, right, and we can save for our kids.
Well, and again, it's what you don't know. So if you're coming from a point of ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative way. If you're ignorant, it just means there's an opportunity to learn. It's not stupid. There's a difference in the definition. So if you're like, okay, our car is dead, what are we going to do? Or even if it's not dead, if it's getting, I know some people who literally, it can cause them to have a panic attack if their cars are getting in that 4 and 5 year mark, because they grew up where there was no ability to fix the car. So now they're going to go out and buy that new car because it gives them security. But in reality, it's putting them in a financial, with these prices, a very bad situation. So if you're making a decision from what you think, but you don't know potential outcomes that you have seen, Mark, or that Lance, you're making these income to debt decisions that you have seen that cause people disasters, yeah, or you're buying a house that is beyond your means to maintenance and keep up. Like I look like this today because I'm getting ready to go out and weed whack 3 acres and put down some stuff to kill some bees. You know, so if you don't have the money to pay someone to do that, and you don't have the time bandwidth to do it yourself, I'm not going to tell you can't buy a house because of the maintenance on it. That actually gets into a fair housing situation in ways, you know, like, oh, you're a little lady, you can't afford to do this or whatever. That's your decision. But sometimes having someone educate you on, okay, you've got 3 acres. It takes someone on a 0-turn 60-inch 3 hours to mow it. Yeah. A 0-turn 60-inch is six? I think we priced them at like 4 or 5, 6,000.
I think it's really important to understand with what you laid out in approach where someone might feel like, okay, 4 to 5 years, I need to have a new car because of safety or because of security.
Or I have a baby and I need a safe car.
Right. And that's valid. That's a valid concern. Okay. But we also have to identify you're trading this for this. And that's ultimately, if it's 20 years down the road and I want to buy a house. And every 5 years, it's, I want to buy a house. I want to buy a house. And we're trading this for this. Somewhere along the lines, we have to stop trading this for this.
Right, because of the security that a house gives you and the wealth that a house gives you. And we've talked about that, so I won't go into it too much. But like the landlord can tell you to move out. I'm selling it. I'm having my child move into it. I'm raising the rent, the whatever it is.
I'm going to raise my hand. I'm getting ready to do that very soon. Jennifer,
Yeah.
you and I talked about that.
Yeah.
And you know, that's part of you know, the foundation that you want, and bringing this full circle. Full circle. When you have, as a couple, when you have two people working towards the same common goals, and maybe there's one giving up a little bit more than the other, and vice versa, or they're both on the same, they're really truly focused on getting to that point. The results with a coach involved, what I have found is 3 times faster than not having a coach at all.
Yeah.
And watching the results has been just them in their story, writing their story. It's been fantastic to be part of that. For those that understand, I'm going to get to this point. We're going
You're cheering each other on. You're holding each other accountable. But the main base of it is you have to be on the same page to begin with.
Yeah, and there's bumps in the road, and I know we're going to have
What?
we're going to have another topic about that. You know, what happens when you hit a bump in the road? What do you do? And I know that that's a future conversation, but
yeah. So all this to say that we may be at some wedding events, planning events in the spring, and we have title coming in, and Lance is going to talk about rate ain't nothing but a thing at a different time, and we'll put a new title up here. Maybe it's Rum Spring or Wallet.
You don't know what it's going to be.
And for anyone listening out there, give any one of us a call. We can get you in touch with. We have a
call, text, DM.
Yep. Tremendous network of resources. There's no reason not to reach out. If you're wondering, it's just a simple request.
We know a guy. If we don't know the answer, we know a guy, and we're happy to help people get to the answers.
Yep, exactly.
As I tell my kids, learn from your mistakes, but learn from someone else's if you need to. It's easier.
There's the new title.
What is a budget?
What is that?
What budget is that? Or the road to commonality.
Road to Moon.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you next week, guys.
All right, take care. I'm going to generate some fun stuff for us to share on our reels and get this ready for coming out on Monday.